بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. PYG community. Inshallah, you all are doing well on this Sunday. And welcome to our office hour. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Before talking about what this topic is and what we got going on today, I'd love to get an idea of who we have here. And so I'd like to ask you to share in the chat box. Number one, is this your first office hour, or have you been to an office hour before? And also, I'd love to get an idea of how long you've been in the PYG community. So 2 questions. Is this your first office hour or no? And how long have you been in the PYG community? So please share that in the chat box. Awesome, awesome. Of course, Zubair and your names are familiar. Alhamdulillah, welcome back. Tsumi, welcome. First week, awesome, awesome. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. That's beautiful. And how about yourself, Big Jojo and PYG member? Alhamdulillah. Welcome. I'm happy to be here. Alhamdulillah. We'll go ahead and get started, inshallah. Today's discussion is about boundaries, and it's hard to have a discussion, so like a heart-to-heart discussion with somebody who is working on recovery in particular, but really, I mean, working on improving their life overall, working to be more healthy, except that the issue of boundaries comes up. When it comes to recovery, the way that this issue comes up very often is in terms of, my technology. And that's a very common thing that comes to mind when the idea of boundaries comes up. We'll see that boundaries are broader than that, and boundaries encompass a lot of things. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala rasulillah, ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Starting with some words narrated by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This hadith that I'd like to start with, it touches upon some things. It's mentioned in Jami' at-Tirmidhi. It's classed as da'if, and so we can take from it lessons, and we can take from it benefit, even though that's its classification. But we should be aware that that's the classification of this hadith. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, "Istahyu min Allahi haqq al-haya." He mentioned that you should have haya from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that he deserves. And the companions replied, "Inna lanastahi walhamdulillah," that we do have this shyness, we do have this modesty. Alhamdulillah. The Prophet ﷺ said, قال ليس ذاك ولكن الاستحياء من الله حق الحياء أن تحفظ الرأس وما وعى. Not just that general haya that we might think of the way that we dress, for example. The Prophet ﷺ in this, according to this narration, said that to have haya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he really deserves is to protect the head and what it contains. وَتَحْفَظَ الْبَطْنَ وَمَا حَوَى, and to protect the insides, the guts, the stomach, and what it includes. وَتَتَذَكَّرَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْبِلَى, and to remember death and the trial. in the trial. And so the Prophet ﷺ, according to this narration, gives us a perspective about haya that includes the whole body. It includes having some awareness of the thoughts that are going through my mind, and having some awareness, of what am I consuming, what's coming inside of me. And he connects this to having haya, having a modesty before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'd like to share something that I find very inspiring. Continuing on this understanding, how do we deal with this relationship between our, what we want and our experience, and what we consume. What you see on the screen now, if you're able to see it but also read it, is not a translation of a poem. It's the Qasidatul Burda, a very famous poem by Imam al-Busiri in praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in that poem, amazingly, amidst the praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he just has a passage just giving advice about how to deal with oneself, how to deal with one's nafs. Almost as I reflected on this, almost as if kind of reminding us that if we truly love the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we would adopt his sunnah and his way when it comes to dealing with our own self. And so what you see on the screen is not a translation, but it's a kind of a rendition in English of some of the verses and some of the meanings that Imam al-Busiri conveys in his poem. And I wanted to share this as we kind of start out our discussion today. So according to this rendition, drinking in your lust will only make your thirst grow stronger. Don't you know that food only adds to a glutton's hunger? A glutton is somebody that is always overeating. One's soul is like a child wanting always to be nursed, to be breastfed. But if you wean him, he'll desist, his craving now reversed. In the original Arabic, it states that if you neglect that child, they're going to grow up wanting to continue to be nursed. But you have to take some steps, and mothers do this and parents do this. They take some steps to make the child less and less dependent on being breastfed, and eventually the craving is gone. That desire is reversed. So careful not to take your carnal greed as your master, because it'll kill you, or at best you'll be forever injured. So he warns us about allowing it to take to take that seat in our lives where we do surrender ourselves to our carnal greed, to our lust, to our desires. He warns us about that. He warns us about getting to that place where, in the same way that we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we forget everything and we prostrate to him, he warns us about having that ever be the state that we have when it comes to our desires. Don't just submit to them. Don't just let them take over. And the thing is, we know that we've fallen into that. We know that we've made that mistake. We know that we've thrown, and that's the thing, we've at times thrown the towel out the window, thrown our commitments out the window, thrown the progress that we've made. Not that the progress is gone when we relapse, but being motivated by it, we let that go and we indulge. But when that happens, he's warning us that if we keep doing that, it'll kill us. And that's realistic. That's realistic. And that's the path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. But people who allow an addiction to grow and fester and grow and fester, alhamdulillah, everybody here, I'm sure, has some resistance to that. So everybody here is fighting, trying to resist its growth, right? But if you allow it to grow, it leads a lot of people to behaviors that they never expected. And we have interviews in our library about individual that says, I never thought this would happen, and then it did. I never thought that I would actually meet somebody physically, but it happened. I never thought that I would have this problem while I was married, but it happened. I never thought that I would pay money to access acting out sexually, but it happened. Or at best, you'll be forever injured. It's going to hurt you. Be the shepherd of your soul on the fields of her actions. Your soul, it's grazing, and it's on this field. And my job is to be a shepherd of my soul, to guide it, to help it, allow it to graze, allow it to to have the things that it wants in moderation, but to keep watch, even if she grazes on the greenest pastures. And that's one of our mistakes. It's amazing to see this advice given by Imam al-Busiri, that sometimes when things go well, we let our guard down. This is very relevant when it comes to boundaries. Sometimes we have adopted some habits in our life. And inshallah, later on, I'll ask you guys, what are some habits that you adopted that you know are helpful? Some boundaries that have in place that you know are helpful. But sometimes we do that, and 2 weeks go by, and I was like, wow, I'm doing so great. I'm doing amazing. And we let our guard down. And Imam al-Busiri warns us about that keeping watch and being vigilant is not something we do for just a week or two. And that's one of the key things that I would encourage those who are new, and also those who are, somewhat seasoned on the path of recovery, to keep in mind. This is a task for everybody. This is a task for the righteous. This is a task for those who are trying to overcome sins. This is a task for everybody, is to maintain vigilance. If that wasn't the case, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasize taqwa so much? Right? So we might be deluded in thinking that being vigilant and careful is something it's only temporary, that I have to do temporarily until I get over this, and then I can live a life without vigilance. But that's not how it works. How often has her pleasure led a man to his demise? And this is obviously not the words of Imam Busiri. His poem is an ancient poem, but this is the English rendition. Packed with hidden poison, he ate those delicious French fries. So I wanted to set the stage with some practical and really insightful advice and wisdom when it comes to dealing with our soul, dealing with our nafs, and dealing with our desires. This is something that I come back to often. It's a statement that I heard from a teacher of mine, Sheikh Faraz Rabbani. I mean, I take courses with him online. I haven't had the pleasure of actually taking a course with him in person, but I take his online courses, and one of the things that he says is that the sunnah with regard to the nafs, and just to clarify, speaking about the nafs, it's the child inside of us. The nafs is the child inside of us, that wants stuff. It wants stuff. Right? With regards to that child inside of us that has desires, the sunnah with regard to it is diplomacy. I like to share this because diplomacy is not the same as you're not going to get anything that you want. It's not the same as taking myself and my desires as an enemy, right? And kind of setting myself up against myself and my desires. It's like a soldier, or like a warrior, or a samurai, that I'm going to just fight you. The sunnah with regard to the nafs is diplomacy. This is very relevant as we start exploring the role of boundaries, as we'll look at some things that, if I see my nafs as somebody, as an object that I just need to fight, then that's what my night is going to look like. Interestingly, as I reflect on this office hour, I think a topic that we're going to come back to often is the nighttime. Is how do our nights end? It's because it's so relevant to those of us in recovery. And so yeah, if I'm a samurai and I'm just setting myself up as a fight against my nafs, then that's how my night is going to end. I'm going to be going to bed, and everything inside of me is screaming out to grab my phone. But I'm just fighting. And the thing is, Fighting is a hard way to go to sleep. It's very hard to go to sleep fighting. And people share, when they're sharing about their experience trying to get more restful nights. I've heard it said that, I do see a question about the office hour. Yes, the office hour is recorded and will be uploaded, inshallah. I've heard it said, and it breaks my heart when I hear this, that I'll go to bed and I'm trying to keep my boundaries, and I just can't go to sleep. Half an hour passes, an hour passes, and during that time, my urge is so strong. I feel anxiety. 2 hours pass, and that breaks my heart. 4 a.m., I'm still awake. Like, what am I supposed to do? Have you ever felt that way? Even if you weren't up until 4 a.m., have you ever felt that you were fighting and it's like the battle wasn't over, right? They say that the wave is supposed to go away, the urge is supposed to stop, right? I'm supposed to be able to move on, but man, it's not going away. Have you ever felt that way? And so, and it's difficult. It's difficult if that's how I'm ending my night, for sleep to actually happen. So we'll look at some possibilities if you find yourself in that state where, you're fighting and, you're not winning. And it doesn't feel good and it stinks. And you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this whole recovery thing? Why is Allah not helping me, making it easier? Doesn't He see that, I'm fighting so hard? I'm fighting so hard. And you are. And Allah knows that. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to find uplifting ways. And I think this statement coming back to will help us with that. Looking at some more things now. What I'm doing at this point is just kind of sharing some general ideas, and then inshallah in a few minutes I'm going to ask you to share the thoughts that came to mind, as you were kind of thinking about the ideas of boundaries. What boundaries are not? Boundaries are not a cheat code that allows me to be less vigilant. So if I'm able to secure every single device that is within reach in my home, that it has it's password protected, I don't have access, I give my phone to a parent or a sibling or even my wife, that if I'm able to do that, then this fighting that I don't enjoy can stop, and I don't have to be vigilant. Having an attitude like that never works. I would be surprised to hear somebody sharing that worked, unless you're unless the thing that you were setting a boundary against wasn't really a big problem for you in the first place. But for those of us that are here, if something has taken years, has grown into a problem, I turn to it compulsively. It has some level of control. I use it as a coping mechanism, right? Those are the indicators of something. Those are the indicators of something being developing into an addiction, even if it's not a full-fledged addiction. Those are the indicators of it. Then having this attitude will never work. If I tell myself now I can be less vigilant, the spiritual consequences that is I completely lost the point, because the point of this was to develop taqwa. I completely lost the point if I'm approaching it from that perspective. And then practically speaking, being less vigilant means I'm not caring for my health, means what else now can I turn to? Okay, I don't have my devices. Great, what's in the fridge? Okay, cheesecake, perfect, right? I'm going to end my night eating cheesecake, and I'm not going to be able to stop eating cheesecake. Just like if I had my phone, I wouldn't be able to stop turning to things. And so it doesn't set the stage for telling myself my choice right now is not to try to like finagle and kind of, like cheat my way to achieving the result that I want, which is I want sobriety so I can feel good about myself. I want to stop turning to this so I can stop hating myself. I'm not trying to cheat myself way to that myself to that. I'm trying to actually establish a healthy life. I'm trying to actually live life healthy. I'm trying to balance the different pieces in my life, so that I can, first and foremost, please Allah Azza wa Jal, Most High. And then after that, I can be more helpful to my family. After that, I can, be more successful in my work, in my school, and things of that nature. It's not a fix-it-all solution either. Um, thanks for that comment, Zubair. Absolutely, absolutely. I'd like to touch upon that as well. Zubair mentioned that we just become more creative and find other ways to access content. And yeah, I would like to mention on that point that that actually touches on the second point, a fix-it-all solution. The thing is, if we see boundaries, especially like technological boundaries, as the solution, things that comes up, you see people, on a forum or within PYG or outside of PYG, they're discussing, okay, how are you going about solving this monster in your life, porn addiction? How are you going about overcoming it? And then we start discussing strategies and tips. And very, very often, the discussion comes up about like removing access to devices, which is good, which is part of the plan. But the challenge and the fear is, the fear and the risk is to place all your eggs into that one basket. Number one, it's very difficult to actually make it watertight. Very difficult to make it watertight. And if you're relying on it being watertight, then what happens that one day that you have a friend over and their devices lying around and they went to the bathroom or they went out for a trip, and now you have access that you weren't expecting, and you were counting on this being watertight. What's going to happen then, right? Or somebody forgot to lock the phone, or somebody's not home, right? Practically speaking, it's very difficult to make it watertight. And then it goes back to, you haven't addressed other issues. You haven't addressed how am I being more healthy. And I hope once we look at some ideas to set boundaries that support health, that support being healthy in the way that I live life, not only boundaries that that I place around the things I want to avoid, and those are important, those are helpful, but incorporating with that how it can be more healthy, you'll see that it's a lot more uplifting. It's not meant to be placed only on the edge. We have these sayings from our pious predecessors that they would avoid X number of halal things in order to avoid one haram thing. So they would avoid halal things that they're allowed to do, because they know that would potentially lead me to haram. And our faith is built in that way, and it's very beautiful. There are things that are makruh. There are things that are disliked to do. You're not sinful if you do them. If you avoid them, though, you earn reward. And if you speak to and learn from people of knowledge, you'll learn that to disregard the things that are makruh and say, oh, it's only makruh, it's only disliked, it's okay, or and to have a very lax attitude about it, you're not sinful by engaging in it, but there's a certain missing of the point, and ultimately, how successful you're going to be at abstaining from haram is up for question. And so they're not meant to be placed only on the edge. And so we'll look at some examples, but I mean, just practically speaking, so that this is not all theoretical, obviously a boundary that's placed on the edge that is helpful. I recommend having this as part of the things you're considering is, let me block, let me have a filter, for example, on my device. I'm not saying that's required. I'm saying if you've considered that, and you have a way to implement that's practical for you, then yeah, I would recommend that. But that's a boundary that's on the edge. That's a boundary that's saying, if I'm already in the place where I am actively looking to seek out content, here's something that is going to stop me. But imagine you have a little fence right, on the edge of a cliff, right, and you're running towards the cliff, right? That has to be a very, it just goes back to like, is that really watertight? That has to be a very strong fence. It has to be a very, rigid fence if it's actually going to stop you from falling over the cliff. But the thing is, the nature of a boundary at that level that's placed on the edge, it's not that strong. Very often you can find ways around it, even if it's just turning to fantasizing in your head. That's it. Fantasizing. People, express, I have trouble, I go to the bathroom, I take a shower, and I relapse. I start fantasizing, masturbating, and things like that. And those are things that I want to avoid. Those are things that I'm trying to remove from my life. Those are things that, how am I going to place strict boundaries around that? So they're not meant to be placed only on the edge. So what could it look like instead? It could look like, instead of when I go to sleep, my device stays, on the desk. That's good. And even people who help, who are like sleep experts or sleep doctors who help people sleep better, say, don't take your phone to bed. It's a very practical boundary. Phone stays in the living room. Very practical, and very helpful. That's one boundary. That's close to the edge. How about taking it a step further? I remember when I first heard this, I was like, this is actually, so it was suggested to me that I should have a media boundary. No media after like 7:30 p.m. So no screens, no computers, no video games, things like that. I remember first hearing that, I was like, what am I going to do after that time? Like, what am I going to do with my time? 7:30, I'm not going to fall asleep until 9:30, 10, if if I'm being healthy. So what do I do with that time? But imagine that boundary, if you can afford it, which many of us can. It's rare that somebody really cannot afford that due to work obligations, family obligations, right? Most of us can afford that. You don't absolutely need your phone for an alarm, right? You can do your text messages and whatnot to family before then. And if something is important to you, then you could set a boundary, no more devices or screen time after 7:30. Right? That's a boundary that's not on the edge. But imagine what happens. The question comes up, sheesh, what do I do with my time? And then we start answering that question. Oh, what could I do with my time? It's a very luxurious amount of time that I have now, right? I could go for a walk. Nice. I could read some Quran. Okay. I could take a bath. If I know sometimes I say that, and some of us might feel like, I don't know, I don't want to step into that territory, that might be triggering for me, which I totally understand, but at the same time, I think there's some merit in the concept. A little digression here, if the idea of using the space that you create by setting boundaries to do something like take a bath, or I've heard other things. I'm just going to share some things. Some people say, I'm going to kind of massage like my legs, or I'm going to apply some lotion, something like that, right? Things that like maybe I've not done for myself in such a long time. I would just encourage you to have some openness about those. Why? Because of what they represent, and because of what they stand for, and because of our absolute hunger and need for what they represent. Those things can represent, if approached properly, hey, you, in my case, Bara, in your case, Abdullah, Ahmed, Bez, I, Zubair, Ibrahim, Itsumi, Joseph, K, PYG member, Sammy, trying to be better, Yasra, Big Jojo. That represents, hey, you, I care about you. Hey, you, here's a little treat. Not a treat to make you numb and forget, not a cheesecake, right? Not a Netflix movie, a little treat to show you that I care. A little treat to show you that you're loved. That's why I suggest not completely ruling out the possibility of including with your boundaries some acts of self-care that maybe seem, out of your comfort zone, right? Some of the examples that I mentioned, for example, bath or a shower, and if you find that that's uncomfortable, start small, start simple. Like honestly, like it's not, it wouldn't be far-fetched to try allowing yourself, giving yourself space. Now I have more space, I set some boundaries. Let's give myself a hug. Right? Yes, there are things in our, there are things that we adopt in life, nice relationships or marriage, relationship with parents, children, that fulfill these emotional needs. But some of us are so hungry and so needy, and they haven't been fulfilled in so long that we need so much. We need so much of it. And starting by giving that to yourself really is very empowering. So I wanted to share that as part of what I encourage you to think about when you're thinking about boundaries. I'd like to share, and I just pause here for a moment. I noticed a comment there. As I'm falling asleep, it's hard to deliberate reflection. Yeah, beautiful. Jazakallah khair. That's actually the next topic, is sleep. This is fascinating to me when I came across this. So beautiful. This is what I'm going to share from Imam al-Ghazali. It's in his book Widayat al-Hidayah. He gives a guide. Hey, here's how you should go about your day if you want to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very detailed, including practical things, but also including general life advice. One of the passages where he gives general life advice, I'll share it, and the end of it is the punchline. So listen carefully for the end of it. Okay? He says that he gives two situations. He says, one, you as every individual in terms of their deen, their religion, is in one of three levels. Either they are safe, or they are winning, or they are losing when it comes to deen. The person who is safe is the person who is successful at completing their obligations and staying away from the haram, and that's it. And that's all they do. That person is safe. He says the person who is winning, who is gaining, who is profiting, is the person who does extra, does some of the extra involuntary acts, and the person who is losing is the person who insists, and the person who falls short of the requirements. So a very simple breakdown of how people stand in terms of their religion. But it being simple, still really brings to light that in this categorization of Imam al-Ghazali, where do I stand? Where do I stand? Am I at least in the level? And this is what he says: if you're not able to be among the winning level, the profiting level, then try your best to be on the safe level, salim, somebody who's safe, somebody who is doing what's required and staying away from the prohibited. And he says, just be careful not to be among the losing level, the person who's falling short of the requirements and engaging in the prohibited. What's so amazing is, just if we look at this simple categorization, Ghazali is reminding us, this is what the fuqaha do. He's reminding us that the first priority is to do the fard, the requirements, and to stay away from the haram. The reason I like to share this and highlight this before continuing is how much emphasis are we placing in our lives on just meeting that requirement? Or, on the other hand, are we being so ambitious that we've forgotten to prioritize just this simple basic requirement? The reason I say that is, it comes to mind even conversations that I have, somebody who's working on their recovery. Sometimes I say, I feel bad, I'm not doing tahajjud, I'm not waking up at night. Or, I have all of these ambitions. And practically speaking, sometimes people have many, many obligations that they're doing and engaged in. So what I ask you to consider, just on a practical level, it's relevant to our discussion on boundaries, is what percentage of your life are you dedicating to being salim, safe when it comes to your deen? And practically when it comes to recovery, that means actually, establishing abstinence and sobriety, and making it so that I don't turn to the haram that I've been accustomed to turning to, and making that a reality in my life. Now I know you might say, Brother Bara, I try so hard. Every night I go to sleep and the temptations come and I start fighting them. I say, I know. I ask you what was happening during the day. Oh, during the day, I was working on getting an A. I was working on being a perfect son. I was, preparing to give khutbah. I was doing this and I was doing that. So then I ask, so you're saying that just the 15 minutes at the end of the day is what is the energy and the time you're dedicating to being safe in your religion? Now I know that might come off as like harsh. Like, what do you mean? Like, I was doing my best during the course of the day, but here's what I'd like to emphasize, that I think look at fiqh helps us to remember, is that abstaining from the haram comes before doing anything that's extra and above and beyond. And that's why boundaries are so important. Boundaries are so relevant, because when I know that something leads me down the wrong path, leads me down an unhealthy path, sometimes we hesitate to implement that because we haven't learned how. We don't see examples of people that implement boundaries that keep them away from going down the wrong path. Because of our lack of examples, because we don't know how to do it, we don't implement those boundaries. And so we don't exert ourselves. We don't spend time and energy to say, hey, today, I just want to make it and I don't want to act out. That's my priority today. And that was my priority for the whole day. So I asked you, hey, what were you doing today? I was focused on, keeping my sobriety. That's it. I was doing other things, but this is what was the priority in my life, because Imam al-Ghazali says, I need to be, at the very least, I need to be safe in my religion. And so I wanted to emphasize that priorities are important when it comes to setting boundaries. We set boundaries, and we'll talk about it. So there's set boundaries with people, things like that. We set boundaries not because we're selfish. We set boundaries not because we're controlling. We set boundaries because boundaries communicate our priorities. Boundaries communicate what's important. Somebody knows how to set boundaries. I used to go to I used to visit with a psychoanalyst, really like great guy, which is a form of therapy. And I used to visit with him, and I used to just enjoy being in his presence so much. He had boundaries that he would implement. Like when the end of our session would come, he would, it would be very clear that he's telling me that it's time to go, that it's time to go in a very, very beautiful way. But there was no room in the way that he was implementing that for me to overstay, the session, or stay longer than was allowed, or anything of that nature. And that's what healthy people have learned to do. Maybe they had examples. Maybe you didn't have examples of how to do it. So we look at some examples here. That's what Imam al-Ghazali says in terms of the deen, 3 levels. And then he says, I'll say the next part more briefly, when it comes to your treatment of other people, there are your interaction with other people and how well you fulfill the rights of other people. He said people are on 3 levels. He said that people are on the level of the angels. Those are the people that are actively trying to benefit the people around them. And then he says that there are people who are like cattle, cows and camels and sheep. They just go about their life. And they don't harm anybody, and they don't benefit anybody. Of course, we benefit from them, but the example he's giving here is they don't go out of their way to benefit you. And then there are people who are like snakes and scorpions, who people don't expect any good from them, and also they're afraid of their harm. But here's what I wanted to emphasize at the last point. When Imam Ghazali says that make sure that you're at least safe in your religion, and try to be amongst the highest level when it comes to your dealings with people, then he says, look, here's how you should spend your day. During your day, it's essential that you don't busy yourself with anything except that which benefits you in this life and the next life. And if you are having trouble staying safe when it comes to your religion while you're out there interacting with people, Imam al-Ghazali says, and you're having trouble just like keeping the bare minimum, not hurting people, not hurting yourself, then you should isolate yourself and go back to your house and stay in isolation. So Imam Ghazali, there's some situations where you should isolate yourself. But I want to continue here to the point. And if in your isolation, the whispers are so strong and the temptations are so strong that in your isolation, you find that you cannot abstain from that which doesn't please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what I want to emphasize. I think this might be very relevant for us here, as was mentioned in the question, right? I'm by myself in my room. There's nobody I can hurt except myself. The whispers are strong. The lust is strong. And so if you find yourself that you're in that place and you're not able to remove the temptations and the lust by like doing extra, like praying more, like some people, they say, I have a lot of temptation, I'm gonna go pray 2 rak'ahs. Right? Imam Ghazali is not saying just do that. He's saying, yeah, sure, you could do that. But if you can't, which I think is practical for him to mention this, if you can't remove it, فَعَلَيْكَ بِالنَّوْمِ. And this is the punchline here. The Imam Ghazali is saying, look, if you're having trouble getting things straight, just go to sleep, bro. You're by yourself, nobody can harm, but the whispers are so much. عَلَيْكَ بِالنَّوْمِ. Not just go to sleep, then you must sleep. عَلَيْكَ بِالنَّوْمِ. Sleep is the thing that you must do. فهو أحسن أحوالك وأحوالنا إذا عجزنا عن الغنيمة رضينا بالسلامة. So that's the best place we can be if we're not able to like be profitable in our life and do all these good stuff and have all of these achievements during our day that we can be proud of. Then at least رضينا بالسلامة في الهزيمة. That we're going to be pleased that, you know, I couldn't make it happen. At least I'm going to stay safe. Go to sleep. I can't harm anybody. I can't harm myself when I'm sleeping. But Imam Ghazali doesn't say that that's the best state to be in. He says, but that's what we should emphasize and prioritize if that happens to be our reality. I wanted to emphasize that. Now, that doesn't answer the question, what if I try to sleep and I have trouble? We'll look at some ideas, inshallah. I'd like to ask you guys for your thoughts. But the reason I want to share this is this emphasizes for us the priorities. The priorities. Right? Am I busying myself so much during the day that by the time it's time for me to start preparing for sleep, start welcoming sleep, it's not even a chance. There's no chance. My mind is running way too much. Right? I had too much light in my eyes. Right? I didn't take into consideration what I was eating when I was eating it. So I haven't prioritized being ready to make sleep happen. So it's not likely that even this level of advice that Imam Ghazali is giving, that I will be successful with it. I wanted to make sure that we get a chance to look at some ideas that can support us. So I'd like to share here something that it's a little tool, just keep it in mind, that supports, you know, ways that I can be healthy. I'll give some brief comments about it. It's called the 1 to 9 ladder. And it's something that I learned from a trainer in high performance named Brendan Burchard. And he gives some quantities to keep in mind when it comes to sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Right? These are things that come from different sources, different, places of research. And, people who talk about sleep say that people who perform highly, it's not that they have some secret productivity tip, but one of the top things on their list is getting enough sleep. 6 to 7 meditations a week. Of course, for us, right, that just means being present in our salah. But if we would like to go beyond that and incorporate mindfulness practice, for example, we have a session, we had an office hour on mindfulness, and you can refer to that. But of course, we have tools in our faith, but we should not take those lightly. We should not take the value of being present in the moment lightly, which are things that those tools give us access to. 5 to 6 workouts a week. That might sound like a lot. Keep in mind that that includes like light exercise as well. And so it's useful to ask yourself, am I prioritizing this? Am I at least prioritizing that I get a walk in on most days? If I don't like exercise more heavily than that, do I get a walk in? Do I get a stretch in, in the morning, in the evening? Something to keep in mind. 2 to 4 meals a day. How am I eating? Is my eating sporadic, or do I have some routines that I'm prioritizing to have proper nutrition? How's my nutrition? And then 1 to 2 breaks per hour. So some people recommend, or some people favor that they work, for example, 50. It depends on the nature of your work, but working for 50 minutes and then taking a break. Some people favor working for 25 minutes and then taking a break and then returning in 25-minute chunks. So that would be the reference to the 1 to 2 breaks per hour. When it comes to setting boundaries with others, just something I mentioned very briefly here. I think most of today I've been emphasizing, boundaries when it comes to devices. How do I set up my nighttime routine? Things of that nature. But I don't want to leave the question of setting boundaries with others. I find myself that I stay up late when others want to hang out with me. Maybe a parent tends to find me at night and tends to want to like share with me and maybe complain to me at nighttime. And I don't ever encourage being judgmental or looking down at the people who turn to us, the people who want from us. But I know that we can experience that, and while we're still learning to ourselves be healthy, then that can be frustrating, and we might have within us this annoyance. Right? With time, we can overcome that. We can learn to be accepting and forgiving. But one of the starting points for actually the thing that makes that possible is stop being hurt. So sometimes we set boundaries because we hurt ourselves. I use my, I stay on my phone, I stay on my screen for too long, and I'm not sleeping properly. Sometimes we set boundaries because when we're with somebody else, we get hurt. We get hurt. Maybe not deliberately, but somebody, likes to complain a lot. That's just the way that they are. We make dua for them, but that takes up a lot of our time, especially late at night, and it's time for me to go to bed. And it happens consistently. I love that person, but this is happening consistently, and I'm being harmed. So just something that you can keep in mind in that situation when it comes to setting boundaries that involve other people. I need to go to bed, and here's somebody that doesn't seem to appreciate that that's something that's important to me. Right? On one hand, we want them to understand. We're like, why don't you understand? If I say that I need to go to bed, you're going to get upset. You're not going to understand. So I'm going to stay. Or you're going to get upset. You're not going to understand. So I'm going to just give you the hand, say, get out of my face. And I'm going to leave angry that you don't understand. Right? Of course, both of those are not going to be productive. So one advice that I heard is to have an iron fist. That this is something I cannot sacrifice. I have to go to sleep. I have to go now. But to wear a velvet glove, so the delivery can be very positive. Does that mean that when I do this, I expect them to, oh, okay, Habibi, khalas, I understand, get out of here? No, they're probably still some people will still be upset because this challenges them. They're not used to this. They didn't do this themselves. They would always give other people what they asked for, even if it hurt themselves. So they're not used to this. They don't understand this. So don't expect them to understand. But this is this way you have maintained your character. You have maintained your sanity. And guess what? When you wake up the next morning, right? You continue having a smile. And if you continue smiling, eventually they're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be so upset at them, right? Maybe they'll give you the cold shoulder. You keep smiling, right? Be like, okay, like how long am I going to give them the cold shoulder for? You keep being nice. They say, man, they might express to you that they're upset about it. I understand. I know you wanted to spend more time. I'm sorry. I wish I could have. I had to. This was a necessity. Boundaries communicate our priorities. I have to be healthy. That's my priority because that's my job. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu alaykum anfusakum. Upon you, your responsibility. Who are you responsible for? Yourself. Alaykum anfusakum. Did you do your job? Were you safe in your religion? Did you abstain? Did you abstain? Did you make it a priority? If not, why not? So-and-so didn't support you? Alaykum anfusakum. It was your job, not theirs. It was your job, not your parents' job, not your wife's job, or your spouse's job. Right? So boundaries communicate our priorities. What boundaries have you found to be helpful? List 3 to 5. Type them up, but don't hit enter. These can be different types. Can be related to devices or related to time, related to people. So list 3 to 5 in the chat box, but don't hit enter yet. I'll tell you when to hit enter, so we give everybody a chance to think. Take another 40 seconds. Just a tip, if you want to go to a new line in the chat box, hit shift enter rather than enter. Enter will record your message, but shift enter will give you a new line. I'll ask you to enter what you've got in 10 seconds. All right, go ahead. What could you think of when you thought about boundaries as you reflected on this? Take a look at, as the response are coming after you've shared yours, take a look at what's there. Take a look at what others have mentioned they found helpful, and see if you consider that as one of your boundaries. So just looking at some that that come up: video games, TV, sugar, social media, web. 7:30. I gave specific boundaries. And those are boundaries. By the way, if yours are not specific, it's okay. I still want you to share them. But while we're sharing, a boundary is only a boundary if it's specific. Right? A boundary is something I can turn to. A boundary is something that I implement without thought. Because sometimes I can't think. I can't think right now. It's 11 p.m. I don't have the brain power to think about whether it's a good idea for me to eat cheesecake right now. I don't have the brain power. So the boundary doesn't remove the need to be vigilant, but it supports vigilance when I am not, it removes because I can't make micro decisions all the time. I already have observed that this is unhealthy for me. I would like to try this boundary that I'm not going to eat cheesecake past 10 p.m., for example. And once I've said it, it removes the need to think about it when the decision is there, if I can honor it and respect it. So Yesra has some, it sounds like some routines there: play games, read novels, spend time with family, and sleep. So you've included some positive routines. The question I would ask is, what are the boundaries that go around that? Right? Right. So what do I say no to help me say yes to things that help me feel healthy? Right? I can only say yes to things that help me feel healthy once I've said no to the things that take up all my time and energy. Beautiful. Kay is sharing. Wow, that among your struggle, Kay, is that to the point that I saw my friends after 3 months. So with all of this that I'm prioritizing, sleeping on time, journaling, therapy, it's been 3 months and I haven't saw my friends. Thank you for sharing that, Kay, because that's a reality that we might experience. But I would love if, Kay, I'm not sure if you have already, I would love if you would share your thoughts or follow-up thoughts on that. Like, how do you feel about the fact that that's been the case? Would you say that you regretted your approach? Right? I know it can be stressful, it can be difficult. Sammy, beautiful. Trying to be better, beautiful. Friends room, video games, coming up again. Itsumi, you took a specific step there with getting rid of a specific item that gave you access. All right, beautiful. Next question, you ready for it? You listed things that you found helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Kay. Here's the question. Think about the last month. Rate your level of success at maintaining those boundaries. 1 to 10. 10, maintain them like a boss. When I come to that boundary, I'm like, nope, I ain't gonna cross. 1, every time I come to that boundary, I'm like, hey, boundary, ahlan wa sahlan, here I come. Just be honest with yourself. Once you have your rating, enter it. Alhamdulillah. All right, so you got a chance to assess yourself. Let's pause for a moment and actually, Kay, have I got your rating yet, Kay? Oh, there you are. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Kay. Let's pause for a moment and let's congratulate our 2 members who are at 9 and 10. Say mashallah. Itsumi had those specific boundaries, didn't cross them. Zubair had those specific boundaries, was fairly successful, and not crossing them. Why do I say that? Because this is a must. You know, I think back to, it's actually one of the articles we have on our blog. You know, it shares that as one member been working for so long on his recovery, would go to therapists, go to counselor, this kind of stuff. Eventually, like the counselor, and after like so many sessions with this therapist, the counselor asked him, and he came in and said, yeah, I relapsed. The counselor looked at him and said, do you not want to stop? And he started feeling frustrated and angry. Like, I come here, you know, because I want to get help. You asked me, do I know? Of course I want to stop. But then he let him ruminate with that. And he said, but sometimes it feels like it's not urgent. And so the counselor went and his computer pulled up a little document and typed what he was saying. He said, of course I want to stop, but sometimes it feels like it's not, like it can wait. It feels like it can wait. And that was a big wake-up call for that member, because he had been working for years. He had made a lot of progress. He knew the things that helped him. Like, he knew the boundaries. And some of us, we don't know the boundaries yet, so we're still figuring them out. Some of us know the boundaries. They're specific: this time, this amount of sugar, this amount of sleep. You know, we have to explore to find them. So he knew them. He had a list. But if he were to rate himself on a 1 to 10, maybe even if he rated himself an 8, and he would still be in that room saying, I relapsed. Maybe if he rated himself a 9, he would still be in that room saying, I relapsed. But he told his counselor, look, I have a list of things that I have to do every day. Can you please hold me accountable to doing these things? Here's the list. His counsel was like, if you think it's helpful, fine. And he said, here's the list. Okay. And he got a wake-up call. It's like, I've been going on for years just because I keep telling myself this can wait. I cannot cross these boundaries. I have to sleep at this time. I have to get this amount of, exercise. I have to eat properly. These are things. Part of like the 1 to 9 ladders. These are things you guys have. I have to, set a time cap on my video games. Things like that. And that was actually his turning point for long-term sobriety after years. And that was when, if he was to be asked, how well have you kept these boundaries? Probably he would say 10. 10. Because 10 means this is what's important in my life. 10 means this is my job. 10 means this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from me. 10 means I know that these things are important and they matter. 10 also means, and I know we're going a little bit over here. I appreciate you guys, appreciate the interaction here. 10 also means, I can trust myself. I can count on myself. Imagine the moment you can say, I can count on myself, right? Not one day I tell myself this is important. Next day I throw it out of the window like it doesn't matter. I can count on myself. Means I don't know if I absolutely have to stop my screen time at 7:30. Maybe I don't have to. But 2 things. Number 1, my sobriety and my recovery are important. So even if I'm not sure, I'm willing to try. And number 2, I can count on myself. If I say I'm going to try, it doesn't mean I'm going to try, inshallah, yallah, hayallah. Doesn't mean I'm going to try. And by try, I mean once 7:30 comes around, I'll see how I'm feeling. No. Verbalize it to somebody or support people, PYG, accountability person, say, hey, for the next week, I'm gonna try this whole 7:30 thing. I'm not gonna access my device. All right. And imagine how you feel if after 7 weeks, or 7 days, just 7 days, you did that. You did that. You kept that boundary. Maybe you still struggled. Maybe you ended up relapsing a different way, but you kept that boundary. You say, hey, if I consider something to be important, I can actually do it. That's what 10 means. 10 means I can count on myself. We need to be able to count on ourselves if we're going to make it to Jannah. If we're going to support ourselves to get to Jannah. If we're going to support ourselves to do our job in this life. We have to get out of the place where I can't even count on myself. So start with something, verbalize it to somebody else so that you feel more committed, and practice that commitment. That's where accountability really helps. Beautiful. Beautiful. Self-worth. Beautiful. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Let's end with this. Yeah, I appreciate you guys are still here. I understand if anybody had to leave early. I mean, not early, on time. We're here a little bit late. But alhamdulillah. This is the last question. And when I say implement right now, so what boundaries do you need to implement right now to show yourself that you care? I care. You know, in our last office hour, Ustad Iman pointed out that any behavior that hurts us communicates that I don't matter. Communicates that I don't matter. And I had to think about that. I was like, what do you mean, Ustad? Right? But if I'm willing to do something that's going to cause me harm, I'm telling myself I don't matter enough to stay away from the things that harm me. And she was sharing with us that I don't matter comes from somewhere. We could look at our, family history, look at how we were brought up. What was our, how was our parents' parenting style? Did it work for us? You can see that office hour for that. But boundaries communicate, I do matter. Boundaries communicate, I do care. What are 3 to 5? List them. You saw some examples from others. Maybe it's the same 3 to 5, but you were at a 3. Now you need to know that I need to go to 10. List them. Give yourself a minute to think about this. And if you can, if before you listed them as general, now can you make it specific? Before I need to cut down on sugary foods, now I'm going to have this many grams of sugar. Which, by the way, in the US, the recommended amount is 50, no more than 50 grams of added sugar. In other countries, it's 25. So if that's what I'm doing, or is it no sugar? Be also realistic with yourself. Make them specific. List your 3 to 5. Alhamdulillah. It's interesting that some have listed self-care routines as boundaries. And this is, I think they do really combine with each other. In fact, if you were to use a self-care tracker, I would recommend that some of the items are routines, positive habits. Some of them are boundaries. So I might include the workout on the self-care tracker, and then I might include, the 7:30 end time. The self-care tracker is helpful because you can track how you're doing. And once you identify the daily rituals that you would like to incorporate in your day, then you'll know when you're on track. You'll track it every single day. If I have 2-3 days where I'm doing less of them, I know where I'm heading, and you know where you're heading. So this is a helpful part of your recovery journey. So I congratulate you all for engaging in this. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uplifts us. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives our failings, forgives our shortcomings, and accepts us coming together for this gathering. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تدع منا شقيا ولا محروما يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين وسعت كل شيء رحمة وعلما. Here we are, Allah, trying to put some pieces together. If you bless us, Allah, then we have nothing to worry about. If you accept from us, Ya Allah, then our path forward will be blessed. It might be difficult. It will be difficult. But we'll know that those difficulties are part of the test and that you will support us along the way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from everybody. I'm going to, I love the question that you posted, Itsumi, about are boundaries universal? I think because we're at the end here, instead of starting a conversation in that, can I count on you, Itsumi? I don't know if you've ever posted on the forums yet, but can I count on you to post that question on the forums? You can, but if you can give some background, like why you're asking that, maybe share your own thoughts and opinions. And then I expect that there will be those that can chime in on that, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Thanks for sharing this time, all of us here together. Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.